live. I don't know if you can see the message on the screen that says you are live.
Yeah, it just popped up.
Nice. Okay, so fun fact, this is the first time I'll be having coffee for any of my coffee chats. So it's usually so hilarious when I say coffee chat and there's never anyone with coffee. So do you have your coffee with you?
No, this is far too late for me to be having a coffee. I've just got
Right.
water in a big
Yeah,
jug.
yeah, that's valid actually. I was thinking about that, but then again, I'm pretty exhausted today, so I felt the coffee wouldn't be a bad idea to
Yeah.
stay out here. All right. Maybe we can give it like 2 minutes or 3 extra minutes for some people to join. Um, yeah. So while that is happening, let me see. I want to be sure my post went out. Yeah. So how do you feel?
Good.
Why did you have to think first?
No, I was just yeah, I think just generally speaking, it's the first time I've done this kind of thing, but I think it's exciting to do this kind of stuff. And depending on how well this one is received, maybe the opportunity to do more in future.
That's nice. Yeah. So I actually love the coffee chats because they're like less informal. It doesn't sometimes it might give the interview vibe because they're like two like it's me asking questions and we're having a conversation, but I try as much as possible to make it very casual and have fun while at it. Yeah. So I just always go with the flow and try not to be so rigid. So yeah. So just feel free to go with the flow. There's no need to, feel like it's an interview session.
Well, I think interview practice is also probably a good thing for anyone to
Right?
do. Help
Yeah,
keep your skills sharp.
true. That's true. But I feel like when you have casual conversations, you're like more relaxed and you're more in your authentic zone than in an interview setting.
Oh, I would, just because of the way I am, I think I tend to be authentic regardless of the setting, which sometimes gets me in trouble, but it's an easier way to live when you don't have to
Right.
overthink the situation that you're in.
I think I should learn that from you. But no. Okay. I guess I'll just start right now so we stay on time. So hey everyone, everyone that will join in later and everyone that will watch this recording afterwards. So hi. Welcome to this coffee chat termed DocOps, AI and Cloud, the intersection impacting technical documentation. This conversation is mostly focused on DocOps too, just needed to call out make a call out on that. So it's mostly focused on DocOps. And today I have with me an amazing fellow, Mark Woulfe. Mark, I'm sorry, could you pronounce your surname?
I know, yeah, it is Wolf, although the way it's spelled, I have had people. Well, someone thought it was the first time I heard someone mispronounce it.
Yeah.
Is it spelt similar to souffle, which is with an S. So one person called me Woufle, which was pretty funny. Most people, because of the E on the end, end up going with Wolfie, which has become like a nickname. And so a lot of people do just refer to me as Wolfie because of that.
Yeah, but I feel like I would call you Wolf because I'm like familiar with the Wolf. I mean, everyone is familiar with the Wolf name, so yeah. So it just sounds like Wolf, and it's obvious that it should be silent. I think I'm pretty good at pronouncing names.
Well, you got that one right.
Yeah. All right, so we're talking about something that is very much important for anyone building a career in technical writing right now, and I would say tech in general as well for anyone interested in starting a career in technical documentation. So if you're a technical professional or you want to become one and you're looking to increase your earning power as well, so this session is for you. So we're going to go over what DocOps is about with Mark throwing in a lot of insights from his years of experience, and we talk briefly about how AI is impacting documentation, the role of cloud. I would speak on that because that's my background and the skills you need to thrive in at this intersection. Yeah. So, and of course, I'm not doing this alone. Like I said, I'm joined by Mark Woulfe. He's a lead DocOps specialist. I'll still let Mark do his own intro. So I just want to do like a quick intro. So Mark Woulfe is a lead DocOps specialist and he has over 12 years of technical experience. He's worked at companies. He works currently at New 4J, correct me if I'm Neo4j, and he's worked at Facebook, which I find very interesting, by the way. And he also started his career in game development before moving into DocOps leadership, which is such a cool journey. So, Mark, welcome. How are you doing today? This will be the third time I'm asking you.
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you, and I'm excited to have this coffee chat. Even if I'm not drinking coffee, at least you're drinking coffee for the both
Yeah,
of us.
at least one of us. Yeah, one of us having coffee.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess we'll start with Mark's journey. It's like in less than 3 minutes or less than 5 minutes. I feel Mark's journey is quite fascinating because I did a bit of stalking him on LinkedIn, so I checked him out, and I find his journey quite fascinating. So he began in game development and ended up leading DocOps. So, Mark, how did this transition happen, and what skills carried over for you? For someone who's never heard of DocOps before, how would you explain it simply?
I'll start with the journey first. So that was one where, in terms of my sort of university degrees, my undergraduate degree was pretty much like computer science, so very much going down that programming route. I did then actually work for a year as a technical account manager in a mobile advertising company, which was very different from working with a bunch of programmers. But I had already planned to go back and do a master's degree in, more specifically, computer games programming. So narrowing my sort of subject matter a bit more towards what I wanted to do. So after that, I did a bunch of sort of small contract freelance kind of roles coming out of university on the master's degree side, being sort of a developer. And that's actually when I first started consuming documentation, I would say. I mean, maybe part of the undergraduate degrees as well, but for learning programming and learning all these different tools, I relied heavily on documentation. So I had sort of been exposed to documentation at that point. And then I got to a point where I wasn't really enjoying myself as a developer in the games industry, particularly as a junior developer. I can't say what it's like now, but back then it was very ruthless. You were either really, really good, or if you were someone like me who relied more on documentation and other people to help me out, I found it quite a rough journey. So that's when I kind of transitioned away from doing software development. And that's when I came back to, or ended up in a role where I wasn't a technical writer at the time. I did a lot of sort of support work with the ticketing system. And then it was a very small company. So the CTO at the time was the one writing the documentation. And he asked me if I could start helping with some of that. And so I started writing documentation from that point, which was about 9 years ago. And I was a tech writer before I even knew what a tech writer was. It was only when I was thinking about leaving that company and moving to another one where I had to like Google what I did and try and figure out what my job title was. And that's when I came across technical writer as a job title. So from there on in, I tended to be working in tech writer roles that were more coding focused, more technical, because I'm someone who could read and write code, having come from the software development background. So I did a lot of API documentation, code examples, that kind of stuff. And then I've been at Neo4j for 4.5 years now. And I started off as more of a traditional tech writer, just working on product documentation. But about 1.5 years ago, we sort of formed a sub team within the team, which was DocOps. And that's kind of what I've been working on most recently. And then in terms of what is DocOps, that's probably a hard question to answer because it's probably different depending on the different companies in which it may exist, and people may be doing the kind of stuff in DocOps without it being called DocOps. But the way I think of it is it's the documentation version of DevOps. I think the name is pretty much copy pasted. So we work on docs operations. So it's basically everything outside of the just day-to-day technical writing. It's about setting up GitHub repositories and build pipelines and publishing processes and all of that other kind of stuff that needs to happen for documentation to go from an individual person or team and then be exposed to a wider audience. So that's the kind of stuff that I would say falls under DocOps. And then I in particular do a lot of work with analytics. So looking at Google Analytics, understanding where people are going in our docs, where they're coming from, that kind of stuff. So I think that kind of stuff falls under it as well.
Awesome. Nice. That's pretty impressive, to be honest. I feel like most people have heard, most people in technical documentation, most people in the documentation world, they always say, "Oh, I didn't start as technical writer. I just ended up being a technical writer." So I feel it's cool. It's very similar to my journey in that sense. So yeah. So like you already touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to ask, what does your day-to-day look like as a DocOps specialist?
So my day-to-day, I don't have a typical day-to-day, and that's kind of what sets my role aside, in that when I was writing product documentation, my day-to-day would just be catching up with PMs and engineers and understanding about what features were coming along that I needed to make sure that I had documentation for. So that was a very typical day-to-day. Whereas the kind of stuff I work on now can be very different depending on what kind of project that I'm currently working on. I think the one general thread of stuff that I look at is analytics. So whenever there's a need from either within the team or within the wider company to understand more about where people are maybe going in a specific manual, or being asked about a specific page and being asked how that performs, I always come back to some kind of analytical work. But in terms of the day-to-day, it can be very different depending on what I'm needed to do or what I'm interested in working on. I have a lot of flexibility in the role, which is something that I definitely enjoy.
Nice. I love that. So yeah, so from your experience, what do companies really look for when they hire DocOps specialists?
It's really hard for me to answer that question because I've not been hired as a DocOps specialist. I kind of just transitioned into it internally, but I can give some insight in what I think is a good skills or good interest to have if you want to transition away from maybe just general day-to-day tech writing.
Yeah.
I think the moment you're interested in so I imagine that a lot of tech writers speak with PMs and engineers, and could probably get most of their work done just speaking to those two, and maybe other tech writers if your company has other tech writers.
Yeah.
I think if your interests go beyond that and you want to go talk to marketing about how they advertise things, if you want to go talk to sales and figure out how the people are actually selling the product, if you want to go talk to support or field and understand the pain points that people are having with the product and actually talking to end users, generally, if your interest lies outside of more than just the sort of narrow focus on whatever you may be documenting, that you're probably well suited for DocOps, because you end up having to work on a much bigger picture of understanding things like information architecture, content strategy, analytics, as I said. And I think it's a very communication heavy role, and it's communication with very different people across different parts of the company. So strong communication skills and someone who's good at looking at the big picture, I think those are good skills to have if you're going to work in DocOps. And then there's the technical aspect of, so there's one person in our team who does a lot of the sort of heavy lifting on the technical side of setting up GitHub repos, running GitHub actions, that kind of stuff. Obviously, then a technical background and an ability to do that kind of stuff is going to serve you well.
Awesome. That makes sense. Yeah. So it's basically syncing DevOps practices. So first of all, looking at the bigger picture, and secondly, basically syncing DevOps practices with documentation, automating the process. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, once you're in that role, how do you show value? Like, how can DocOps professionals measure and demonstrate ROI to stakeholders, for instance?
I think I would even expand that question to how do technical writers show ROI and value. I think that's a hard enough thing in itself, because sometimes technical writers are maybe a bit more on the edge of things compared to I don't think engineers have to prove their value because they're needed to make the thing, and PMs don't necessarily prove their value in that they needed to sort of get the engineers to work and put things together. I think tech writing is something that's maybe some people might think is a bit more superfluous and not needed, or at least not needed. Maybe if the company's very small or doesn't need public-facing documentation. And so that was why I was always interested in analytics. If I was writing a page of documentation, I could get a thumbs up from people internally, but that's not the end users. Often, I've always worked in public-facing documentation. I've not done too much external, so it may be different for those kinds of people. But I was always interested in, well, I've made this page of documentation, but is anybody actually reading it? Because if no one reads it, then what was the point? What's the point in me? So that's where I was interested in analytics before I even moved into this DocOps role. So I think analytics is a key thing to say, hey, there are this many people coming to the website that are trying to learn more about how the product works through documentation. There's a chance that I think with a lot of software, it's people like developers who are early adopters of stuff before it maybe gets to a buying decision through a manager or something. And developers are the ones who don't give a shit about the marketing website. They want to go straight to the docs. They want to exactly know how it works. They want to find code examples. And so that's where documentation is really important. And then I would say the ROI for the DocOps team is almost in a sense. So we luckily at Neo4j have a team of tech writers, and we have a manager who is a previous tech writer. The first time I've ever been under a tech writer as a manager. I've been under engineering managers, I've been under PMs, but no one who's done my job day to day. And the way that we prove ROI as a docs team, I think as a DocOps team, I think is by making the life of the rest of the team easier. Because if we're dealing with all the build pipelines and any failures and able to implement testing and lint checking and all that kind of stuff, then we're making the rest of the team's jobs easier and making their lives easier. So that's the kind of ROI there, where the manager can see, oh, I don't have a team of people complaining because they pushed a docs PR and something else failed in a build pipeline, and now they can't push their docs because something completely unrelated has failed. We can kind of take on that burden, and it just means it's easier for the rest of the team to do their jobs.
That's a lot of insight. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think now we can go into talking about AI, briefly talking about AI in DocOps. I mean, everyone is talking about AI now, so sometimes I feel like everyone just wants to chip in AI, even when it isn't necessary. But yeah, AI is the trend right now, and even in technical writing. So now let's talk about AI. It's on everyone's mind. So what does it look like in the DocOps world? How is AI currently impacting documentation operations? I think that's like the better way to ask the question.
Yeah, so for myself personally, I like to keep a healthy level of skepticism of any new shiny technology, and AI very much falls under that at the moment. So I'm not totally against it, but I'm also thinking it's a bit overblown and overused at the moment, and is in a lot of applications is a problem, a solution looking for a problem rather than something like a problem that's known and then it's something that's trying to solve it. I think the amount of companies trying to push it and saying, oh, you need this, and it's like, well, no, I don't. I absolutely don't. You're just trying to use AI as a buzzword or a marketing term to try and get more people in. And so I think in terms of DocOps, and I think because we have a sub team of people focused on DocOps, I think our need for AI is actually a lot less than maybe a company that doesn't have people dedicated to DocOps or has a smaller tech writing team who maybe they don't have the internal skills of people to do things like GitHub repo management or publishing or pipelines or GitHub Actions. I think AI can be very helpful, and AI tools can be very helpful in that side of things, which again is hopefully letting the tech writer just focus on them writing and not having to deal with that kind of stuff. I think the fact that we're actually a team of people who are looking at it's almost like we kind of don't need AI as much. So I don't think in terms of internal tooling, we use a whole lot of AI. I think the interesting thing for us is what user-facing AI products or surfaces should we be looking at? So we have a chatbot which is powered by AI. It's something we built ourselves, again, because we have a bigger capacity to do that kind of stuff. We're not forced into buying off the shelf software and hoping it works and hoping we can customize it to what we need it to do. So we built our own one, essentially, as a joint effort between engineering and DocOps. And so that's one way where we're giving the user a different opportunity to interact with the documentation. So most people Google things, and that still remains the main trend. After that, some people use internal search. So we do have internal search on our docs, but now we essentially have a little chatbot, which is just a different way to be able to interact with trying to find information. So you can be on any page in our documentation and ask it a question about anything within the documentation, and it will be able to provide an answer to you there and then also link to the page of documentation where it's gotten that answer from. So I think that's one thing that's kind of DocOps and AI combined and in like a public facing way. There's other things coming into it where, in terms of analytics, I've set up a dashboard where I'm tracking referrals coming from AIs. So if someone asks a question on chatgpt.com and ChatGPT links to a page of our documentation and the user clicks on it, then that we can track that as something coming from ChatGPT. So it's another area where I think people should be aware of how LLMs are using their docs and referencing the docs. Obviously, we don't know if someone doesn't click across, or if the LLM doesn't provide a link to our docs and it just gives them the information, then currently we have no way of tracking that, but no one does. So that's maybe a newer thing that will come into play. But in terms of it's another thing coming up. Google and SEO have been king in any kind of discoverability of any web pages. AI is now changing that. And so we've kind of implemented something on our end to just give people a different option, a different thing to do. And it's also something we're keeping an eye of in terms of people coming, or at least clicking through from other AI platforms into our docs.
That's cool. If I had to interface with that, we use something similar. I wouldn't say we built like a tool per se, but there are tools out there that actually, show you, allow you to track where your users are coming from. So you can actually see that the source says SRC says ChatGPT, or SRC says Perplexity. So you can see where your users are coming from. And I feel the chatbot you mentioned is a very, very useful tool, because I've had to use documentations where, for the AI powered search, that works. But being able to actually ask questions and send follow-up questions to the chatbot, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, to be honest. It saves a lot of time, and it reduces the amount of support tickets as well, because then again, they can find things themselves. So like, it improves experience, developer experience in general. So that's really a cool idea. I actually love that. Well, I guess I would have to jump now into the cloud side of things, jumping from the cloud side of things, because that's my background. Mark already did a great job at touching on that a little bit when he mentioned GitHub Actions and the rest. So from the cloud perspective, one of the biggest advantages is scale. So if you're coming from the cloud background like I am, one of the biggest advantages you can actually apply in documentation is scale. So instead of docs living in silos or on someone's laptop, cloud platforms basically allow teams collaborate in real time. So they help automate updates. They help make documentation instantly available worldwide. And so this is where cloud and DevOps practices come in, with tools like one of the tools Mark mentioned, GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, GitLab CI/CD. So you can treat documentation like code. I don't know if you've heard the term docs as code. So it allows you to treat documentation like code. And Mark, do you have something to say? Because we are like,
So we at Neo4j use the docs as code approach. I think I've always been lucky in the first company I was a tech writer at, where I mentioned I was helping the CTO. We kind of stumbled across docs as code. Because we were both like, we can use version control to be able to understand what changes we make in documentation. So we ended up accidentally going the docs as code route. And obviously I had come from a development background, so I knew about GitHub and source control, and I was used to those kind of tools. So it worked for me. And then it just turned out to be pretty much the industry standard when it comes to documentation. Not everyone uses it, and I don't think everyone should. It depends on your independent use case. But yeah, so we use docs as code, and all of our docs lives in GitHub repos, which some of them are public, some of them are private, just for the content that they have. But yeah, so all of our docs are technically hosted in the cloud. And then we have, I think pretty much everyone in tech writers in our company, we use VS Code. And then we're updating the documentation in very much a coding environment. And then we do pull requests for like new features and stuff like that. And from those pull requests, we can then get reviews from other engineers. And it's very useful for that, because engineers already know that environment. They already know about pull requests. They already know about GitHub. So you're meeting them at the level that they're already at. And then we also use, I think it's called Netlify. So we also, from those PRs, generate previews of what the actual docs would look like. And we can then hand that over to PMs, because PMs maybe are not as technical and maybe don't want to go into GitHub and look at raw Markdown or ASCII doc, because they're like, well, what's this? What is it going to look like in the end? Exactly. So therefore, there's tools you can use to actually generate what the final thing would look like. And so you're able to find a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I've had scenarios where I'm trying to get the PM team to like, hey, use my past experiences, get the PM team to use GitHub. I'm like, we just want a single source of truth. Like, just use GitHub. It's that easy. I can actually walk you through the workflow, and you're like, man. So yeah, actually finding something that works for everyone always makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's about it from the cloud angle. We have a question from Fuse 2.0 Spark. Interesting name. So yeah, he or she, or I'll just say they say, are there any AI tools that can do full documentation now?
It depends on what they mean by full documentation. I think the one thing I've seen, certain AI tools that can take PRs, like code PRs, and generate documentation off the back of that. I haven't experienced any of those myself, so I can't judge at how good they are at doing that. Then there's also the element of, in terms of like probably a lot of the publishing and the DocOps stuff can maybe, there's maybe AI out there who can help, as I mentioned, for when there's not a DocOps team that you can turn to, and if you don't have a good relationship with the web team maybe, and you're kind of challenged with doing that yourself, that I think that's probably the main helping point of AI. The one thing that it kind of can't do well is generally write something from scratch, especially if it's, I mean, if we're just talking about LLMs, they don't know about a feature that hasn't been released yet. I mean, they don't even know about the last year of things that happened on the internet, because they're training models that are back in 2024, and they can look stuff up. But when it's a product feature for something that hasn't been released, or if it's completely private and you're just doing internal docs, LLMs kind of, if you ask them to, I mean, maybe this is a bit more back in the day, but when they were first coming around, I deliberately asked it a misleading question of, how do I do this in the product that I document, knowing that you couldn't do it? And it would just made something up. And I was like, I can see how that's going to become a problem. And so I think maybe more in the review process, it's helpful. I always used, there was a Grammarly plugin for VS Code. And that was kind of, as I was writing, it would be reviewing what I'm doing for any stupid spelling mistakes. And you could set up rules around third person and passive voice and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff is very useful, because I just wanted to focus on the thing that I was documenting. But in terms of something that can like fully replace a whole tech writer or a whole tech writing team, I'd be somewhat skeptical of how well that would work. But I imagine there's probably right now there's like 3 or 4 tools that you could Frankenstein together to maybe try and get something like that. I don't know if you've experienced any of those tools.
Yeah. So Fuse 2.0 Spark. I just love the name Fuse 2.0.
It would be funny if that is an AI tool and this is purely marketing exercise.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question. maybe you can send like a follow-up question or something if you're insatisfied. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So I guess we can move on. Well, 29 minutes. We tried. Yeah. Okay. So Fuse 2.0 Spark says, yeah, I did. Okay.
That's out.
Right. Okay. So I have one last question I would say, or maybe second to the last. So for professionals who understand DocOps and also bring in AI and cloud skills, what kinds of career opportunities are opening up?
I think the thing that's very interesting is actually around a lot of, so in the AI world, there's a lot of stuff around agentic and MCP servers going on right
Yeah.
now.
Mhm.
And I think there's a very interesting opportunity for tech writers to be involved in both of those, because there's a lot of natural language being used in those. So for an agent or an agentic LLM to be able to use a tool or an MCP server, the person who creates the tool or creates the MCP server needs to write a description of what that tool or thing does. And the LLM relies on that description to know when it should use that tool or when it shouldn't.
Yes.
And that's just a string written in English. As of right now, I would say 90% of those are not being written by tech writers; they're being written by engineers. And I think, generally speaking, tech writers write better documentation than engineers, and I think this is potentially an area where tech writers could write better inbuilt descriptions for these tools for the agents and things to use, and there
Yeah.
may actually be performance gains to be had there. So I think anyone who is at least interested in AI or playing around with AI and is wondering what opportunities they have to actually like become more valuable in the job market as opposed to worrying about being completely replaced by AI.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting field to start looking at and start seeing, oh, is anyone, especially for anyone who's working in an engineering company right now, because AI is so popular, there's a chance that there's MCP servers being written or tools being written or agentic systems being written in your company. I would go and reach out to the people doing that, or like looking at the code base and seeing how good are those descriptions. Is it a case where, oh, I could suggest a better description that might actually make the AI more performant?
Awesome. I love that idea. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Hi, Treasure. Treasure is saying hi, Debbie. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Saying hi when we're almost done. It's funny. It's like coming at the end of an event and saying hi.
Well, I have time to go a little overtime.
Yeah, I think we still have
If
like,
you want to, I don't want to keep you here for longer than you want to be, but yeah, I'm happy to answer a couple more questions.
sure. I think we have like how many minutes? 13 minutes left or less. Yeah, so I think you already answered this question. So it was about if someone's already a technical writer or maybe a cloud professional, how can they leverage their existing skills to move into this intersection? I think we covered that already, right?
Yeah, I would. It's particularly around as tech writers.
Yes.
Anything around prompt engineering, or as I said, the descriptions that are now starting to appear within tools and MCP servers for agentic AI. I think that's
Yep.
an interesting place to start looking.
Okay, awesome. So I have one other very interesting question because I was very critical when I saw the AuDHD on your LinkedIn profile. So are
Yeah,
you open? Are you okay with discussing that briefly?
yeah.
Briefly.
It wouldn't be on my LinkedIn profile if I wasn't.
Okay. I wanted to be sure I was safe. Yeah, so you're very open about being AUDHD, and I think that perspective brings so much to this conversation about inclusive documentation. You can disagree if not. So can you share how your experience shapes the way you design or think about documentation systems?
Yeah, so it's probably worth saying what AuDHD is.
Okay.
So it's the combination of having autism and having ADHD. So it was actually earlier last year where I was diagnosed with them. I think I had an ADHD diagnosis from when I was a kid, but kind of never followed up on it. And my parents kind of were just like, he's just a kid. He's, there's that reason that he's hyperactive or whatever. But I actually got retested for that and then for autism last year, and then got sort of positive diagnoses on both of those. So that's what we're talking about when I say AuDHD. I think it's less about tools and it's more about people and personalities when it comes to that kind of thing. So the moment I got those diagnoses, I was very open with my manager and then my team that I had those, and that there may be it may be explained, because obviously by that point I'd already been working with them for three or so years. So at that point it was more like, oh, maybe that explains some of the kind of quirks I have as a person. But I think my advice there is, if you can be, it is very beneficial to be very open about that kind of thing, because then it's just, there won't be any misunderstandings or hard feelings or anything like that may arise if you kind of keep that information to yourself and then something happens as a result of it. So by being very open, at least with your manager and maybe, I don't know, HR department or whoever's in that kind of area, I think it just makes life a whole lot easier because things can be more well explained. I don't necessarily need any particular things put in place because of those diagnoses. I just come with a maybe not a warning, but a thing where I kind of just say what I think and say how I feel, and I don't necessarily have a filter when it's like a thought came into my brain, it's come right out of my mouth, and I've not really thought about it or thought about what it meant and who the end audience was. So there's the potential that I will say things that rub people the wrong way, but I think I'm aware of that, and so it's like by being open and honest about who I am, it makes the conversations about that kind of stuff a hell of a lot easier, and it means that if other people know that that's how you are, then they won't think that you're deliberately being rude to them or whatever. It's just like, no, that's just how I work. That's how my brain works. And so I think it's more about, I don't have any special requirements when it comes to tooling and stuff. I just like to be open and honest with the people I work with day to day, just so they're aware that there's that element to me, and that's why I may be or act in the way that I act, and it's not anything against them personally.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm pretty sure someone out there would feel way safer hearing that now. Okay, thank you for sharing that again. So before we move into the questions from the audience, yeah, I said audience. Oh my god, audience. So where do you think DocOps as a field is heading in the next 3 to 5 years? That's like my last question before we take the question from Fuse 2.0 Spark. Yes.
I would hope that it becomes more of a known thing, more of an accepted practice. I kind of think it's hard because I've now worked at the same company for nearly 5 years, so I haven't been in the realm of looking for a job and interviewing and all of that kind of stuff. So it's hard to know what the market is looking for right now. I would hope that generally there's more of a want for tech writers and an importance for good documentation. And I think that's hopefully the direction things head in. And if that is the case, then I think it just becomes, if bigger tech writing teams start getting put together, I think it will mean that sub teams like DocOps, or even if you're just interested in analytics or anything that's not the day-to-day writing, I would just hope that they become more prevalent and more prominent in the industry. I think AI is going to shrink back. It's hard to say, is it a bubble that will burst? I don't think it's going to be like a .com thing where the whole market collapses. But I think it will shrink, and a lot of the companies who have been funded purely based on hype and the fact that they've used the word AI, I think after a few more years, a lot like the actual proper companies that have good use cases, they will still be around. The ones that are just building on the hype will probably die off. You can't operate on hype and shareholder funding for forever.
That was like a hot take, and I agree.
Yeah.
I wish you could actually make that a LinkedIn post. I mean, it's trend. Okay, so we have one question from Fuse 2.0 Spark. I'm so in love with that name. So I'd love to, they say, I would love to ask, I came across Docs as tests. Is it under DocOps?
So I've only very briefly heard of this through one of the Write the Docs meetings and meetups. I think someone spoke about that as a potential practice. I can't remember well enough about it to be able to answer that question in any proper functionality. But I think it was just it's good in the fact that it's just another way of thinking about documentation. I think the more ways we can get people thinking about documentation and different ways of doing documentation and sharing the experiences, the better we'll all be as tech writers, depending on, regardless of what company we're in. Because maybe Docs as Code works really well where I am now, but maybe in the future I move to a company where Docs as Code absolutely doesn't make sense for them, and then it's worth knowing about what are the alternative to Docs as Code. And I think Docs as Test is probably closer to Docs as Code than it is different from it, but it's always interesting to know about different things. But I personally don't know enough about Docs as Test. I've heard of it for sure, but I don't know enough about it to answer that question, unfortunately.
So I think I can add to that, because I know to some extent I know about Docs as Test, and I don't know if you know Manny Silver. He's pretty popular in tech writing space. So he's one of the I wouldn't say pioneers, but he's one of the preachers of Docs as Test. You haven't come across him, yeah?
I think so. This may be the person whose talk I went to was referencing him as the kind of inspiration for it. Yeah.
So I've had a coffee chat with him, and he's very passionate about Docs as Test. So I would say Docs as Test is actually under DocOps, because part of the whole process. So treating your documentation as a product. So that's basically it. So yeah, it's under DocOps. I hope that answers your question. Fuse 2.0 is back.
If that is what it is, then
yes,
that we definitely do. I think that's all of what DocOps is. So when you're an individual technical writer, you'll be focused on writing docs for a particular product or feature, and then that's what it is. In DocOps, we are working on the docs as a product. So that's where the analytics and all the stuff and the information architecture and the content strategy come into it. You're not looking at how were the docs for this particular product. You're looking at how are the docs as its own kind of product. And we also actually do a bunch of, just because the word test is there, we do have a bunch of testing on our documentation as well. So we're a graph database, and the way you interact with it is a language called Cypher. You can think, if you've heard of SQL, it's kind of a similar kind of thing, but particularly for graph databases. And so whenever we have sort of code examples of Cypher, we're actually testing that Cypher is accurate as part of the publishing process. So we do actually test our documentation as well in that use case.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that answers your question. Fuse 2.0 Spark. Right. I guess we've come to the end of the coffee chat. I just want to say a very big thank you to Mark today. Do we have any other questions so we can wrap up? So I always love to be on time. So I promised Mark this coffee chat will last for just 45 minutes, and I'm like 2 minutes away. So yeah, I'm glad we were able to keep to time and have a very fun. I hope it was fun. Anyways, I tried to make it fun. Was it fun?
Yeah, it was great.
Nice. So
the best coffee chat I've ever had.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm still going to add that to my LinkedIn post when I'm done.
A review.
I'll quote you. So yeah, so it was such an amazing coffee chat. Once more, you can watch my previous coffee chat. It's always very insightful and casual, and we share a lot of very insightful information that everyone can actually apply in their workplace, apply to their active job, which is what I love about these coffee chats. They're very useful. And so thank you so much for everyone that tuned in. It's not a radio session, but tuned in. I hope you guys have a lovely lovely weekend, lovely day, lovely week. See you guys. Bye.
I did just before we end, I just want to give a bit of a shout out here at the end, if I'm allowed to.
Sure.
I want to give a shout out to Polina and Elisa, who are the current organizers of the Write the Docs London meetup events. Those guys do an amazing job, and that's actually where us two met each other in the first place. So we wouldn't be here, or I at least wouldn't be on this coffee chat if it weren't for them. So what they've essentially did was revive the monthly tech writer meetups in London post COVID, and I actually wasn't part of the community pre COVID, so it was completely new for me. So if anyone is in London or around London and is interested in documentation, is a tech writer, or anyone in those kind of similar types of roles, I would definitely go look up the Write the Docs London meetups on meetup.com. And I'm probably sure me and you have both posted and shared about them in the past on LinkedIn as well. So I did just want to give those two and that meetup a shout out, because it's especially for anyone who is a lone tech writer or looking to get into tech writing. Like, it's the absolute best thing you can do. Just even whether you're not super interested in the topics change every month. Just the ability to go there and talk to other people working in documentation is very valuable.
Yes, please. Thank you so much for that shout out. Actually, Elisa and Paulina are very amazing individuals, and I'm so glad I'm a part of Write the Docs. So I actually wants to mention that if you need resources like technical writer resources, if you want to read about DocOps as well, and maybe do like more research based on the conversations we've had today, you can actually go to Write the Docs. You can go to Write the Docs. Just search Write the Docs on Google. They have like a couple of resources. They have resources on Docs as tests. They have resources on Docs as code, DocOps as well. So you can actually use those resources. Then you can join the community on Slack as well and look for a meetup closer to you. So I'm pretty sure not everyone is in London. So if you're in London, good for you. We'll most likely see each other this month. But yeah, if you're in other you can look for one closer to you and be a part of. It's really amazing. So thank you so much, Mark, for bringing that up.
No worries.
Yeah. So I guess we can call it a day. 46 minutes.
I've made you run over.
No, that's fine. It was worth it. So yeah. Thank you so much, Mike, once again. Have a lovely day.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks for having me.
Bye.